Happy New Year, Geoff.
Happy New Year to you, Mike.
Do you have a good break?
Yeah, good break. Didn't do very much. Stayed around here in our lovely province, enjoying atmospheric rivers and things like that. So yeah, had a great break. How about you?
Yeah, I got away. Got some heat. Not political heat, but the other good kind. For a week or so. So that was nice. But when we get to strategy suite, I'm going to ask you about what you read while you were on break. But
Okay.
speaking of strategy suite, Geoff and I are going to discuss today the government's agenda for 2026. What will be the top items for them? They may encounter some heat. They will encounter some heat. We're also going to talk about the BC Conservative leadership race. When will it start ramping up? And what about those other parties? Will we be hearing anything from them this year? So we'll get to that in the strategy suite. But first, our guest. We're pleased to welcome to Hotel Pacifico today, interim leader of the BC Conservative Party / leader of the official opposition, Trevor Halford. Trevor, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Much appreciated.
Happy New Year, Trevor.
Happy New
Well,
Year to you, Geoff. Yep.
Well, just for our audience benefit, Trevor, you've been in and out of politics for the past couple of decades as a ministerial advisor, as a supporter of Kevin Falcon's first leadership campaign, and then a recruit to Christy Clark's premier's office, where you had an excellent boss there. Leaving for a stint in the private sector, building pipelines for TransCanada Energy, and returning to politics, first as a civic candidate in the Surrey election 2018, and then being elected as MLA in Surrey White Rock in 2020, having three party labels affixed to you in your 5-year career as MLA: BC Liberal, BC United, BC Conservative.
I'm
Um,
almost hitting for the cycle. So,
so if now I have a question. Didn't you run for office when you were really, really young?
yeah, so I did two things. I actually ran for White Rock City Council. I think it was like, I must have been about, I think it was 18 when I did that. I
Wow.
came pretty much dead last. Um, yeah, I got whooped and it was a great experience. I loved it. And it was a great challenge. But Mike, in that intro, you forgot the one big thing. Like I stand by this. When I first came into that building in 2006, I was with Brinder Buller, who some of
Yeah.
the listeners may know, our first day
Yeah.
together. I was an assistant legislative assistant in the
Yeah.
BC Liberal Caucus. So I had the word assistant twice in my title. So I was getting the person that was getting Val Roddick coffee, I was getting their. So that was the
Well, I can,
that was the authority I held within that
I
building.
can think of few people better to get coffee for than Val Roddick. So that's would have been a
No,
good
I wasn't even getting coffee for
experience.
Val Roddick. I was getting coffee for the person that got Val Roddick coffee. But I was
Even
in the
still,
building. That's all I cared about, man. I just wanted to be in the building.
you have to eat to live,
So,
as Val would say.
yep.
Um, well, that's thanks for coming on. We just wanted to give our hotel guest listeners a little bit more background on you, because all of a sudden you became leader of the BC Conservatives in December.
Yeah.
Um, what a wild ride. I mean, you were obviously a late convert to the BC Conservatives. You jumped on board the slate at the 11th hour when BC United packed it in September 2024. Um, probably wasn't the most comfortable fit right off the bat. Like, how did it go switching parties and ending up with another party and then getting elected under that brand? Like, tell us a bit about the evolution of
Yeah.
Trevor Halford.
So it was easier than I thought it would be, to be honest with you. Like it's no secret that I've obviously got a good and close relationship in the past with Kevin Falcon and others, whether it be Kevin or Diane Watts. But I honestly didn't know that things were going the way that they were going until I got a phone call from a media member saying, "Hey, this is happening," and I was driving my daughter to her summer camp, and I found out fairly quickly what was going on, and and things played out the way they did from there. I'll tell you this though, some very pleasant surprises on some of the people that I encountered, and first and foremost was actually Angelo Isidoro, who's the executive director at the time. Formed a really good relationship with him, and
Still the executive director, isn't he?
He still is, and
Mm.
we need him exactly where he is. But talented guy. So you hear about these people and you don't actually have relationships with them, but I was welcomed on board, and we got going, and it was the campaign. I had to change out signs pretty quick, and there was a popular former mayor of White Rock, former president of the BCGU, Daryl Walker, that was running against me for the NDP, and Daryl's a strong opponent, and so I wasn't taking anything lightly, and we were off.
Had to look sometimes of someone who's trying to walk across the wing of a crashing plane onto the wing of a plane that's taking off.
Yeah.
Always a tense experience. But what were your apprehensions as you made that leap? I mean, you Kevin Falcon had been pretty harsh about the nature of the conservative team and so on. You carried a liberal brand for a while. Now you were going to get a conservative brand. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think so. I've never ever not disclosed the fact that I've always been kind of at home with the federal conservative brand, and that's always been my federal roots. And people that know me know that well. So some of that wasn't a jump at all. It was just knowing the different personalities. And again, it's a new party, right? So the infrastructure, like you know, grew up in the BC Liberal Party where the infrastructure was very solid. Your GOTV, you know how that goes. There's a strong bones in that organization, and there's systems in place where there wasn't so much over here, but you had good people, and they were doing their best. And I think that the fact that we came in just within probably 500 votes of a majority government shows that we were doing something right.
Well, you had to
What's
be,
happening now inside the
yeah.
caucus? Yeah.
What was that, Jeff?
Well, what's happening now? Like we went through one stage, which is narrow defeat, very narrow defeat, lots of turmoil. John Rastad leaves. You're in a transition. You're the leader of that transition. What's the dynamic and the mood inside the Conservative caucus now?
You guys may think I'm full of it, but honestly, it's good. Like it's really good, and for a couple of reasons. I think one is like my biggest goal is to bring in stability, right? And I think the caucus is craving that. They really are. And I know they are. And so that's kind of where our focus is in bringing in, systems in place and not doing anything dramatic, but also giving people certainty and accountability. And I think just in any job, people want to know what their roles and responsibilities are, what the expectations are, and they'll live within that. And we've got a lot of new MLAs, but I remind them they're not new anymore. They've been there for over a year now, and we've seen a lot of growth. So, the challenges that people think there's always challenges in every single caucus. I think that ours are, we've gotten to a good place, and we're going to continue to do that. But I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we're on the eve of launching a leadership race here, and that's going to be different for a lot of the sitting MLAs and on how we handle that. So, I'm there as a resource, and we'll get through this.
When do you expect the leadership race the rules to be announced?
I don't think they're going to be too far off. I imagine sometime over the next couple weeks. Probably. We obviously the LEOC committee came out, and strong LEOC committee. So, I think that once we get those, we'll already see names circulating and people doing events and things like that. But for me, I think it's a great opportunity. Like I'm pumped that I've got a front row seat for this.
And
This
you're
new
are you staying out
leadership.
of it? I'll
Yeah,
just,
you are. Sorry.
Am I
are you,
staying out of it? Yeah, this is I so yeah, absolutely. And you know what? This is what and I've stressed this to our caucus, I've stressed this to staff and everything like that. Um, every leadership race that I've ever been able to have my hands on, I've done it because it's awesome. There's nothing like a leadership race. So I actually encourage people to get involved. I think like I really do. I never understood why people don't get involved if they can. Obviously, for the role that I've got now, I'm not getting involved, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to do that. But I can tell you that whoever wins this thing, and even for the people that don't win it, they're going to have my support going forward. But this will be the first leadership race I actually get to sit back and observe instead of getting my hands in there.
Picture this. You're heading home for the holidays, but you're stuck on a single lane country road. Cars are backed up. There are bottlenecks at every turn. And what should have taken a few hours ends up taking all day. Now, imagine if that road suddenly became a 10-lane superhighway where traffic flows at incredible speeds with no congestion. Well, just like traffic needs open roads to flow smoothly, powerful computers need the right network to reach their full potential. That's why presenting sponsor TELUS has equipped their sovereign AI factory in Rimouski, Quebec, with advanced networking technology from NVIDIA. Instead of computers waiting in line to share information, NVIDIA quantum InfiniBand technology lets all of the computers communicate instantly. It's like upgrading to a 10-lane superhighway for data, so more information can move at once, and AI supercomputers can work together as one powerful team. For Canadian businesses, this means faster results and the ability to tackle bigger, more complex AI projects with no more data stuck in traffic jams. That's the power of TELUS and NVIDIA's collaboration, building a strong network that turns AI bottlenecks into open roads for Canadian innovation.
So, I mean, you mentioned earlier there are a lot of potential candidates. Some are out of the gate, some are mulling it over. Do you expect to see a large field? Do you expect to see more than half a dozen throwing their hat in the ring?
I think so. I hope so. I don't know if that's going to be, I think we might start with that. I'm not sure we're going to end with that. But like when you're looking at some of the caliber of names that are out there right now, I think it's pretty exciting. Like I fully believe, um, and this is the way that I've said it both publicly and internally, is that we're electing the next premier of the province of British Columbia. That's what it feels like to me. It's like that race that we had, in 2011, where Christie was victorious. Is that I feel like this is kind of like that on a different stage. Is that we've got an opportunity here to do that, and I think that's pretty exciting. So the number of names, I think we'll start, at a minimum with that, Mike, probably, maybe 6, 7, but do that for my daughter if she's gonna watch this,
Six,
but
seven?
she'll be horrified now. But yeah, I'm not sure that it'll finish like that.
Conservative leadership has 6, 7 candidates. There we go. You heard it here first.
6 or 7.
Shameless attempt to bring in the younger generation. Um, so So you've got this interim phase you're going through. You're helping bridge the caucus and you're looking forward to the next session of the House in February, which you'll lead the caucus into that session. But what happens if I mean, do you have a contingency plan if EB drops the writ in the next couple months, or what if they bring in the DRIPA legislation and it fails, and the leadership question hasn't been resolved yet? Are you prepared to serve as Premier of the province of British Columbia, Trevor?
If I'm prepared to serve as an ALA in the caucus, then I can serve as premier of the province. I think, listen, we're ready for anything.
Yeah.
I'm fully aware of that. And, whether or not the premier is going to call an election, he's going to know that. I don't for a minute think that he's going to be surprised or say, oh, well, this vote failed or whatever that is. If they want an election, they're going to go to an election. It's going to have nothing to do with me or anything else. They're going to make that decision and do what's best for their party. At the end of the day, yeah, we're going to be ready, no matter what scenario is, whether they go before the leadership race is concluded or shortly after, or if they're going to go the full term. Um, uh, it's not practical not to be ready, right? Like especially in this situation, like we are one illness away from them not having a majority government. And we've already seen a couple votes where, like we've had like maybe 8 votes, I think, where the speakers had to break it. I don't know how sustainable that is. So, obviously the premier is making those determinations. I don't know how much time he's spending thinking about this, but in any case, we'll be ready. I'll be ready.
Well, let's say they are short a couple votes. Let's say they are, as a couple MLAs are um, professionally incapacitated from voting. Um, would you, would the Conservative caucus vote down the government on a vote of confidence at the earliest opportunity, or would you? Because we saw in Ottawa where there was a key budget vote, and the federal Conservatives were keeping their powder dry um, ensuring that there wasn't an election. Um,
Yeah.
if you had the opportunity, would you vote this government out of office, say in February or March?
Yeah, we're not propping up the government.
Okay.
We're not. That's something that goes against everything that we're not propping up this government. And I don't think anybody should be or would be surprised by that. But yeah, we're not going to be orchestrating anything like that.
How do you see it shaking up? I mean, you're going to presumably be the House leader now until there's a new leader in place and picks his team or her team. Um, you're going to go in and try to bring the government down on the budget, which makes sense to me. It's a confidence matter. It's a very tough budget. Everybody can tell that. What are you seeing coming ahead? How do you map out the session in your mind? What do you think are going to be the first and second and third big things you want to tackle?
Well, I think that the biggest thing is going to be how the province is going to respond to DRIPA. The premier's talked about this almost every media avail that he's gone. He's getting questions on it. And what are they doing? What amendment are they going to bring forward, and what certainty is that going to give British Columbians on how we handle this? And I don't suspect that he's going to give me a heads up on how they're going to do that. We'll find out on the floor of the legislature. But there's some big expectations there. And there's some big expectations that that's going to come earlier or sooner rather than later. And we'll have to evaluate that when it comes. So I think that's the first and foremost. Everybody, to me, they're talking about two big issues. Number one is, what is the premier planning when it comes to addressing the challenges that we are seeing right now with DRIPA? And the second is, obviously, Geoff, you alluded to it, is the budget. And I think that people are kind of bracing themselves for this budget. And we'll have to see what happens the second week of February.
Well, I mean, probably you're the wrong guy to ask, Trevor, because you are the interim leader. So, some candidate may crop up in the next 2 weeks who has a take on DRIPA, which will then tend to become policy if they're confirmed as leader of the party. So it's a bit speculative. But what do you think would replace DRIPA, if anything? You've been very clear. You've offered to have an emergency session of the legislature to repeal DRIPA. Should we just go back to 2017 or 2018 before DRIPA and call it a day? Is that the conservative position, or is there some other pathway to reconciliation that conservatives favor?
Yeah, I don't share this view, Geoff, and others may differ, that the path to reconciliation has to be solved on the floor of the legislature. I don't get that. I think the path to reconciliation needs to be solved through relationships. Somebody's got to explain to me if DRIPA has advanced reconciliation in the last 4 months. I actually think we've taken a step back considerably, given either public opinion or some of the issues that we've seen play out in the courts. So I'm not sure. Everybody says, what's your solution? And if they're looking for a legislative solution, uh, I don't have that, because
Well,
I'm not sure that
Tahltan,
that's
just as a
yeah.
factual matter, the Tahltan just ratified a Section 7 under DRIPA, which will unlock billions of dollars of mineral investment. So it's not an either or. It's not a nothing will happen with DRIPA. It is happening with DRIPA, and the Tahltan have said, don't amend DRIPA. So I think the question will come to the Conservatives. Okay, we hear you. You don't like DRIPA. What do you like? Because we've been down this road before in the province where we've had to completely regroup or lost 10 years of uncertainty in economic activity potentially because of conflict.
So when you look at all the agreements, whether it's Coastal GasLink or some of the other ones that were done, and all the benefits that have flown through to First Nations, those were all done and completed before DRIPA. We have some great economic projects that have done in partnerships with First Nations that have unlocked billions of dollars that have all been done before DRIPA was introduced. So I understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily think that it's an all or nothing, but for me, again, I don't think that reconciliation is going to be solved on the floor of the legislature, and I don't think it's been well served in the last number of months, full stop.
Well,
Is
when
it a
you
good
were,
election question, though? Sorry, Mike. I just want to, is
yeah,
it a good question, a ballot question? Is it one you'd welcome?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's for sure. And I actually, to be totally fair, I don't think it's a good ballot question at the end. I think that's why the premier is stumbling along on this, because he hasn't had a clear answer. And neither has his colleagues, right? They've said, number one, that things aren't working the way they are, and they're frustrated with how things have played out in the courts. The problem with that is that, we all feel that way, but what is the remedy here? So is the remedy to go and put forward an amendment that, what is the certainty that British Columbians are going to have on an amendment that's going to be put forward? And when is that amendment going to face a test in the courts? We don't know. Right. So you don't, everybody can say that there's a certain degree of certainty there, but there's really not until it's tested. And that's one of the things that I've argued here. And that's why I've asked for a full repeal. So, until we actually see what the premier has in store and how he's going to rectify the situation that we're in, I'm going to remain skeptical, and my position on that's not going to change.
So you voted for DRIPA in the legislature when you were
I
in
did not.
opposition. Oh, weren't you there? What?
Wasn't elected yet. That was
Oh.
2019. Yeah.
Okay, I got it wrong. So
You got it wrong. No,
I have to throw this question in the garbage then.
Yeah.
But you have some colleagues who did, including John Rustad and Peter Milbar. What do you think they were hoping to accomplish by voting for it, that didn't happen? Was it too much wishful thinking? Because the legislature was pretty much unanimous in favor of DRIPA at the time. I guess it was Andrew Wilkinson was the leader. What, is there not anything to salvage from that? Because there was obviously goodwill and intention at the time to legislate free, prior, and informed consent.
Yeah, and I've always used the line, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And I think that if you look back at some of the comments, whether they're, from Michael Lee or from Ellis Ross or Mike DeYoung, and all those people have, are very well seasoned in the legalities, and especially with Ellis and some of the issues in terms of Indigenous relations and reconciliation. I think that their frustrations, and you kind of heard Mike DeYoung talk about this over the last couple of weeks, is that this was canvassed to some extent, and there was a degree of certainty on the government's part that we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in today. And I think you take people at face value for that. I really do. But the problem is that we are now in this situation. So how do we rectify it? I've put forward what my idea and my plan on is on that, and the premier's put forward his. So the public will decide which way they want to go. But I think for the people that were in there, I honestly, if you talk to them now, everybody believes in reconciliation to some degree. And what that means, people may have different interpretations, but I don't think that the people that you discussed, if they knew that we were going to be in the situation we're in now, I don't think that they would have gone that way.
But the core concern in the public, I think, is, and we could debate whether they're over concerned or been panicked by improper comments, any of that. But the concern is maybe my private property is at risk. But there's no amendment that you can make to DRIPA that would say, no, your private property is not at risk. You'd repeal DRIPA. The First Nations have overwhelmingly said they want to keep DRIPA as it is, not even amended. So if you're successful in repeal, or that's the ballot question, isn't that potentially one of the most divisive elections we could have? I mean, we have DRIPA because of a whole series of court decisions. The premier is frustrated with the courts, but it was the court decisions over many years that right up to the Supreme Court of Canada that proved the necessity for some kind of legislative response. Wouldn't that be a dangerous election for BC to have? I mean, elections are for debates. I get it. You take risks. You find out where people stand. But are you concerned at all about the divisive nature of it?
Yeah. No, I'm not, because what's the alternative, right? I think that it's, you can frame it as being divisive. I don't look at it that way. I look at it, the fact is that this is a massive issue. The majority of British Columbians support reconciliation. They do. But they are very much struggling with where we are right now. And I understand that, and I sympathize with that. So just because it's divisive doesn't mean it shouldn't be addressed. And I know that's not what you're suggesting, Jeff, at all. I
No, that's right. Yeah.
But, I think that this is like, you can't, this is coming at us, whether we like it or not. And again, if you would ask me a year ago if this was going to be something that we would be talking about, no, I wouldn't have had this on the list, right? I don't think we've ever had an election or a ballot question that's ever been remotely close to what we're talking about today. So it's new for British Columbians, but I don't necessarily think that that's unhealthy. I think this is a dialogue that needs to happen, and is it uncomfortable? Absolutely. But it's going to be more uncomfortable if we actually don't have the conversation.
Old buildings get a bad rap. Anyone who's ever lived in one knows the truth. Old buildings have character, they've got stories. They've also unfortunately got a few energy leaks. Which brings us to Pendrelas. Right in the heart of downtown Vancouver, FortisBC teamed up with the city, BC Housing, and BC Nonprofit Housing Association to take a concrete high-rise from the 1970s and give it the kind of glow-up most of us wish we could get. The goal? Cut energy use by more than 75% while making the building warmer, healthier, and more comfortable for the seniors who live there. This is what's called a deep energy retrofit. It's like renovating a building from the outside in. New windows, better insulation, airtight walls, smarter systems, and high-performance gas equipment that can do more with less. It's a big job. Think multi-year engineering, design and construction, but it shows what's possible when we treat our buildings like assets worth upgrading, not tearing them down. And here's the thing. We need more projects like this. Most of the buildings standing today will still be standing in 2050, and they'll need to dramatically lower their emissions if BC is going to hit its climate goals. That's why FortisBC is collaborating with local and Indigenous communities and partners like BC Housing and BC Nonprofit Housing Association to advance innovative deep energy retrofit pilots in homes and businesses across the province, testing the smartest, most cost-effective ways to cut energy use in the buildings we already have. Climate action doesn't mean starting from scratch. Sometimes it means working with what we've already got. And if Pendrelas is any indication, old buildings might just be the future. FortisBC, energy for a better BC and a better podcast. Well, let's talk about another divisive issue. And that would be the budget. And, you mentioned it earlier, that's going to be a priority for the caucus. Who knows where the deficit's going to stand when Minister Bailey gets up in the legislature in mid-February. In the last election, the BC Conservatives actually proposed a deficit that was higher than what the NDP were proposing. What kind of approach will the Conservatives take in critiquing this budget? Do you have in mind that the deficit should be lower than what the NDP have been dealing with so far? And if so, what kind of policy solutions and fiscal solutions are the Conservatives going to propose?
Yeah, so a couple things, and this answer may be, the last part of it may be a bit underwhelming. So maybe I'll actually address that first because I think it's important. You're not going to see a lot of proposals from me. You're not, because I don't think people really want to hear what Trevor Halford's opinion is on policy over the next few months, because my name's not on the ballot. So I'm really looking forward, and that's not a cop out. That's just honest. Like I am looking forward to how those conversations are going to play out on the leadership trail, and what those thoughts are, and they'll have to defend that as they go forward here. But for me, like, you're going to get a record deficit number. We know that. But I guess the question is, like, what's gotten better? So we're spending all this money, but what can you point to and say, here's the value in what we're spending, and here's the results that we're getting? And I think, like, I'll give you healthcare, for example, right? Spending's gone up in healthcare, but the quality and the access to healthcare has gone down dramatically. So that's very hard for the public to compute, right? Where they're saying, well, we've spent more on healthcare than we've ever spent before, but we have longer wait times. At Peace Arch Hospital, again, I've got another maternity ward shut down. This is the fifth time in 3 months, right? And so people are saying, okay, well, this line where you get up and you're saying, like, we're spending more than we've ever had before. I'm getting diverted now to have my child to two different hospitals, right? Or I've got a 14-hour wait at Surrey Memorial. So that's the thing where I think if the public was saying, okay, well, our service is improved on A, B, and C, then I can live with this. But they haven't. And that's the disconnect of reality here. And I think that's where we're going to be pointing to.
But
Well,
Trevor, if you turn it around and said to people, well, we could have another staff person here to help with delivery and keep the emergency room open, but it'll raise the deficit. Everybody would say, well, raise the deficit.
Yeah, my solution to that would be cut the bureaucracy at the health authorities.
Oh yeah, but we know that's nonsense, right? Sure, get rid of a lot of bureaucrats. You're not going to be able to change the actual delivery process. But anyway, carry on. I think I don't want to just on that one. I think
We know where you stand on that, Geoff.
Well, there's systemic problems, including in Alberta. Alberta, they've got doctors calling for a state of emergency.
Well,
So it's not just a BC issue.
I appreciate that, but I'm going to challenge you on that because I actually think that the bureaucracy, and I know this for a fact, and I'll use Fraser Health as an example. The bureaucracy at Fraser Health has stifled the frontline workers. And I can give you example after example on that, where we got layers and layers of bureaucracy. And listen, health authorities have existed before John Horgan was sworn into the Premier's office. I'm fully aware of that. But things have been layered on and layered on. And I can tell you that there is a massive disconnect between the bureaucracy of the health authorities and those frontline workers. And, I think there's a lot of redundancy. And I think that can be cleaned up, that can save millions and millions of dollars.
I would agree with that. There's nothing virtuous about a deficit or bureaucracy. But just to say that's if we got rid of them, we'd be okay is also not being candid. There's deeper questions we need to get to the heart of, including the need for more staff and so on and so forth. Would you be saying, for example, that the deficit should be, I mean, the Premier said we should be reducing GDP per capita year over year, or the deficit as a share of GDP year over year. Is that a kind of a guardrail you would respect if the budget shows that? Is that something you would say, okay, well, that was what they promised to do, so they'll do it? Or is there, what kind of guardrail do you think you're looking for? How will you assess it?
Accountability and deliverables, right? So if they can start producing projects that are on time and on budget, let's start with that. Let's start with, whether it's the Surrey Hospital or whether it's the hospital on the island or whether it's the SkyTrain extension. Let's look at all those projects and look at, how over budget and the delays that we're seeing. And I get it. There's probably a list of reasons for all of that, but at the end of the day, it's about accountability and deliverables. And, this is a government that has failed on all of that. Right. So when we're talking about the deficits and things like that, the public understands that. But what they're frustrated with, what we as an opposition are frustrated with and are pointing out, is that there seems to be very little accountability on the major files where government is spending its most money.
Trevor, the BC Liberals were in their heyday. Gordon Campbell and later Christie tended to have an approach that just don't get involved in federal politics. We want everybody involved under our roof, but don't put your federal Liberal membership card in the window. Don't put your federal Conservative membership card in the window. Just focus on being BC Liberals. And for the most part, that worked. But under this BC Conservative banner, there seems to be a much more closer allegiance to the federal Conservative Party that arguably could be driving people who are not federal Conservatives away from the BC Conservatives. And I also, I know that, very quickly after you became leader, you were meeting with Pierre Poilievre as well. So what's your assessment of the relationship between the BC Conservatives and the Feds? Is it kind of two peas in a pod, or is it an unavoidable reality to have those types of connections and things have changed? Or do you see that there's space for non-conservatives in the party?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we are the Conservative Party of British Columbia, and there's a lot of values that we share with the federal Conservatives, and maybe there's some that we're not going to agree on, and we'll address those as needed. But for me, I want to make sure that we've got a healthy relationship with the Conservative Party of Canada, and that was the intent of me going over there, and I believe that we're well on that path. But the second thing is that I always remind people, like 95, probably more than that, 98%, I'm guessing, British Columbians don't have a membership card in their wallet. They don't, right? They don't think about this, okay, am I going to wake up a federal Liberal or a federal Conservative? They're waking up thinking about, okay, how am I paying my rent, my mortgage? How am I getting my, my mom to the cancer clinic today? How am I getting paid for my daughter's hockey? That's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about, Trevor Halford meeting with Pierre Polyev or, what Mark Carney's doing for that. Like, they're not thinking about that. Um, and so I keep that in context, right? But, for us is, I think that what I'm hoping and what I'm very confident we're gonna see in this leadership race is individuals putting forward a vision that gives British Columbians a sense of hope that things can be better than what they are right now. And I think people are gonna give themselves permission to really get behind that hope. And I don't think they're going to say, well, I'm a federal liberal or I'm agnostic federally, and so I'm not going to get involved in that. I don't see that. I think like I get the sense wherever I go that there is a massive appetite for change right now. There's a huge appetite for change. And I don't think people are dissuaded by federal alliances or allegiances or, who's meeting with who. I don't see it that way. The appetite is growing day by day. And I think that if we put forward a vision and a path and a platform that resonates with British Columbians, I think we're going to have success doing that.
What do you think the road to victory looks like? I mean, a year ago, which seems like centuries now, Angela Isidoro and others who were in the leadership of the BC Conservatives said it's a polarizing context we're in now. We want to make sharp divisions between ourselves and the NDP, and we're not so worried about the center. The center's not where the future lies. But now you see Gavin Dew, who is, someone people thought might put his hat in the ring. He says he won't for a Conservative leader here in BC, but saying we've got to find that middle road with a broader vision that attracts more people. Is that a tension inside the party, or is the focus on getting elected going to just make that go away?
I think there's two things, and I guess this is kind of inside baseball, but you guys get this. Traditionally, governments don't get voted in, they get voted out. I think that's first and foremost. And I think that you need to give people permission to vote for you. And I think that's where we're at right now. And I think that we're kind of at that point in our political journey here as a very young party. But I, this whether you're putting forward a platform that's center right, I don't get it. Like I think you pull forward a platform that resonates with British Columbians. Like you talk about healthcare, right? What's a right wing platform on healthcare? I think it's about deliverables. I think it's about you look at transportation and you look at whether you're gonna what you're gonna do at the Massey Crossing. It's not a right wing issue or left wing issue. It's an issue that needs to be dealt with. DRIPA, same thing. So I think as we go forward, there's a laundry list of issues that need to be dealt with. And I don't think they're coming from a center or a left or a right perspective. They need to be dealt with, right? So I think that's kind of the platform, and I imagine that's going to kind of dominate where we are for our as we go into this leadership race.
Mm-hmm. So by the same token, would you see some of the MLAs who ran as BC Conservatives and then split away to be independents or one BC or whatever, do you anticipate and hope they'll return to the fold and there'll be a single unitary challenge to the NDP?
So are you talking about the five that are
Yeah.
no longer in caucus? Yeah, every situation is different, and I'll be honest with you. Like I get this in every interview, and it does get it kind of, I wouldn't say it gets frustrating, but my thing on this is that I'm focused on the people that are currently in the room, right? And that's my biggest focus. I'm really not focused on the people that are outside of it. Um, you know, I think every situation is different. I think that, you know, I think for us is that, we have to look at where we are as a party and what we want to do going forward. And ultimately, like whether or not somebody comes back, I think that decision's got to be made by caucus. And they're not going to be made by one leader. It definitely will not be made by me. But I think those decisions, need to be by caucus. And like I said, each person that has left, or in one case was asked to leave, is a different circumstance and has to be addressed in kind of individually. So that's where we're at on that. But again, you want to stress that nobody, including myself or whoever wins this leadership race, is bigger than the party. And so this notion that, if you bring back 5 people or one person or 3 people, that, it's going to signal something, I'm not necessarily, I don't buy into that.
What do you what do you think would be the scenario if one of a leader is chosen who doesn't have a seat in the legislature? Do you think it's important for the leader to have a seat sooner than later, or do you think it's possible to run this with you helming the caucus in the House and a leader out in the hinterland campaigning for a period of time?
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to that. One is, if somebody from the outside wins, then, how long does that take? And that's, we've gone through this before. Actually, we went through it with Christie.
Yeah.
And how that, kind of formulates. And then again, once you do that, it's actually the decision rests with the premier at that time, because I think he's got 6 months to call the by-election, right? So I think when Kevin came in, I think actually Premier Horgan at the time, Geoff, you would know, because I think maybe it was around 45 days or something like that.
Wasn't long, no.
It wasn't long at all. And Kevin was actually able to get into the House for the tail end of that spring session. So, we'll have to see how that plays out. Like I always think too, is that, I personally get more done when I'm not in Victoria. You're able to get out more, you're able to meet with your constituents, you're able to travel more. Victoria, you're obviously confined, especially in this situation where, the NDP are just holding a one seat majority. So I think there's opportunity on both. I think that one is it's great to have a new leader come in and cut their teeth and assert themselves in the legislature. But it's also important too to get in there and get out into the communities and really establish yourself throughout the province. So, I think any scenario you can make work.
Okay. Well, Trevor, I know you're a busy guy. We appreciate you stopping by to Hotel Pacifico. I know you're busy managing your fantasy football team as well. That's obviously taking a lot of time out of your schedule.
It was a winning season, Mike. It was a winning season.
Not for me.
No, it was not.
Wish you all the best as you herd cats leading into the legislative session in February and taking your place as leader of the official opposition and asking that first, well, I presume you may ask the first question in question period in February. So good luck.
Appreciate that, guys. Thanks.
Good to see you. Premier David Eby says BC needs people to get back to work, but how are parents, especially mothers, supposed to do that without childcare? When quality childcare is available and affordable, parents can go to work, businesses grow, and BC's economy thrives. The BC government promised $10 a day childcare within 10 years, but 7 years later, only 10% of childcare programs across the province are $10 a day, and early childhood educators are still poorly paid. Here's what the economists say. Since 2019, affordable childcare has added $5.8 billion to BC's GDP and added 33,000 workers, mostly mothers, to the workforce. $10 a day childcare is one of the smartest economic investments our government could make to jumpstart the economy. Help us push BC's government to deliver quality $10 a day childcare for families, for the economy, for all of BC. Visit 10aday.ca to find out more.
Okay, back in the strategy suite. First one of the year with you, Geoff.
Yeah, it's a target-rich environment. Many strategic questions.
Now, I warned you. What did you read over the holiday break?
Well, I read, I'm just going to turn and check.
That whole bookshelf, whole bookcase.
What We Can Know by Ian McEwan, which was
okay.
I used to really read a lot of his stuff, but I haven't for a long time. It's an interesting book about memory and records. It's set in the future when there's been climate change and the UK is flooded, and they're trying to track down a copy of a poem that became famous, read at a private gathering. And so the question is, the interesting part of it, many interesting parts of it, but there's bazillions of records saved in the server farms of the world, especially in Nigeria for some reason, which everybody's able to look through to see if they can find clues to the actual document they want to see that was written on vellum, on parchment. So there's no digital record of this poem, but
Oh,
there's an enormous amount of other records, and so there's an entire world of scholarship about that. But it's as you get through the book, which I found an easy read, it simulates a lot of interesting questions about what could happen and how we
okay.
remember things, all kinds of stuff like that. So
Well,
yeah, it was
you're
good.
always reading something interesting. I picked up a copy or got a gifted it for Christmas. A copy of the Coots Diaries, Jimmy Coots, who's principal secretary to
I have it here on my
Pierre
desk.
Trudeau.
Looking
And that
forward to
was
it.
a recommendation of the Hurley Burley or Curse of Politics, one of the two.
Yeah.
They had the author on, Ron Graham, or the editor of that. So for those political junkies out there, and I know there's a lot of you, Jimmy Coots was a legend as the principal secretary of Pierre Trudeau. In this diary that's been released posthumously is very candid and really is an inside the sausage factory account of what happened in government. And I think it's very relatable to current day because it's like this is a guy going through it, dealing with power, dealing with people who want power, dealing with election strategy. And there were two back-to-back elections in 79 and 80 and all the events that went on. Seems like a long time ago. It is a long time ago, but I think a lot of modern day lessons for people. And it's just really interesting read. So there you go.
Yeah.
I also
Very
binge,
rare in Canadian politics to have such a book. It's pretty common in British, but Canadians, we never do that. So
yeah,
it's great.
very, and I also binge read Alan Gregg's Vanity and Learning Substack, which was fantastic. I read like 60 posts that he's written. They're all like 2 or 3 minutes each.
Hmm.
So I really recommend that too. We talked about it on our 12 days of Substack episode.
Lots of
Uh,
BC nuggets there.
there are lots of BC nuggets, and I'm grateful that Alan's recorded his candid thoughts as well. So back to BC. NDP government's agenda. They've got a challenging first quarter, I think, coming up. Geoff, what do you see as the kind of the top things they have to contend with? I mean, obviously, Cowichan's going to
Well,
be high on the list.
they're going to seek, obviously, the premier's on a trip to India starting in a few days. They're going to try to focus on the economy, but it'll be budget first and then it'll be DRIPA. And the premier said yesterday that he is going to bring in amendments to the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which he hopes will fix
Mhm.
some of the frustrations that people have been feeling about that with regard to two court decisions. But it's a road fraught with peril, which I wrote a bit about on my Substack blog. Very, very difficult
Yeah.
challenge because one case really isn't amenable. It wasn't decided on DRIPA. It was decided on other grounds. So that has to be done by appeal, which will take years probably. He's ruled out a reference, which would be faster, but not wouldn't happen in real time. It would still take some time.
Mm.
But the amendments to the legislation are difficult in themselves, not only because they have to be carefully crafted, but because it was a partnership discussion with First Nations and other stakeholders, and the First Nations 30 First Nations organizations have told them they don't want to see amendments to DRIPA, period. So it's a contradiction for the premier that he's going to seek to advance reconciliation by making changes to the legislation that are not supported by First Nations. And we'll see we don't know what the content of them is, but just talking to Trevor Halford a moment ago, he's absolutely right. I think this is going to be a historic debate, one way or the other, about First Nations and reconciliation and Aboriginal rights and title and the economy and everything that goes with it.
Well, it's a vexing issue, and it's maybe 47-46 is the new 6-7 uh,
Hmm.
in terms
Hmm.
of numbers this year, because it seems like it would come down to a 47-46 vote on DRIPA if the Greens don't back the government on it, and it'd be hard for them to back the government on amendments to DRIPA, especially with the posture the new leader's taking. So boy, that's tight. That's tight.
Well, and I
So
think it's interesting to hear Trevor say that he's ready to go to the polls, even if they're not finished the leadership process. My own view is, and it's strictly a hunch, it's not based on any kind of polling or anything like that. But although I was there, of course, when John Horgan had a snap election and felt that there would be anger about that initially that would wear off, I think there's a greater risk to a snap election at this point. by the NDP against this particular arrangement where there's a leadership review in place. I mean, Sonia Furstenau was frustrated because she barely got to sit in her seat before there was an election called, but she was sitting in her seat. In this
Yeah.
case, I think the Conservatives are feeling a lot of momentum. They feel like they've had a kind of a, uh, complete purgative session, really, with John Rustad leaving and now
Yeah.
this new process. And you look at who's running this vote for the Conservatives. So we didn't get into this with Trevor, but the president or the chair of the
Yeah.
group that's designing the process is Scott Lamb, who's a senior
Yeah.
lawyer here in BC, but also was for 4 or 5 years the president of the National Conservative
Yep.
Party.
Yep.
So
No, he knows his stuff.
there's a lot
Yeah.
of very,
Yeah.
very senior and experienced hands coming into play here. So
Well, I want to get to that conservative stuff, but I just want to just finish up on the NDP agenda. Like on my list, Cowichan and DRIPA, pretty
right,
high on the list, right?
yeah,
But then they've got their budget and then the potential of unmet needs of stakeholders because it's going to be a quote unquote austerity budget or whatever they're going to call it.
right.
And then you've got the crime issue still there. Big story last couple of days, London drugs pulling out of the downtown east side. Very symbolic
Hmm.
in terms of the issue just being somewhat intractable. Um, you got the oil pipeline, which is another going to be another big issue, and EB's obviously trying to maneuver that to the least damaging place for him, and talking about a refinery. Um, and the one issue that I wonder whether it's over is the housing crisis, the quote unquote housing crisis, because I got my assessment the other day. I own a townhouse in Vancouver and it's down. It's down across the city. I think the value of my place hasn't really changed in 5 years. Like if you look at it compared to what it
Well,
was
mine
5 years ago.
Mine went up slightly, so I'm going to have it reviewed. I'm just
You're in a
kidding.
bad, you're in
It's
a
actually gone
obviously in
up
a
and down a
nicer
little bit.
neighborhood than I am, Jeff.
It's been level
So,
over 4 or 5 years, though, when you look at it.
but and vacancy rates are higher now too. And I'm just I think that political dialogue around housing may change this year a little bit anyways, because I just think the numbers are changing. Maybe these policy levers are working um, in terms of reducing demand. Immigration change is a big deal as well in terms of housing demand. So I mean, new issues come on the agenda, other issues maybe fall down on the agenda, and we'll see that in polling and so forth. But
Well, I think it's a very difficult environment economically for the NDP because the economy is slowing, and there's been a recent report that shows it'll be, I don't know, was it Deloitte that said 1.5%. So there won't be a lot of resource revenues, especially in the forest sector, which is being hammered by Trump as well as all its other problems. But the real estate thing has always been their housing has always been a contradiction in my mind because we wanted to have a big supply, thinking that would drive
yeah,
down the cost. But the cost is going down, and we're not getting new supply because there's a huge inventory of unsold units out there. And
yeah,
real estate,
and
whether
costs are high.
public, yeah, well, the real estate was a big part of our economy, whether people liked it or not. And this was where Gregor Robertson got into trouble. You'll remember where he was trying to figure out how to reduce the cost of housing without hitting people's equity. I mean, if I was thinking that buying my place was going to make me rich, that wasn't the case. I'm not going to continue to see increases. I'll see decreases in equity like you are,
Yeah,
or resale value. And personally, that's okay for a lot of homeowners, people like
yeah,
me. But it still doesn't create affordability for new home buyers yet, because I think a lot of people are hoping that if they hang on, somehow they'll be able to save their price. So this is a big problem in
yeah,
the real estate market because it became so key to our economy.
yeah. Okay, well, more on that in future episodes. So about the BC Conservative leadership race, you mentioned Scott Lamb. He's the fellow who's chairing the leadership organizing committee. He's done this for other parties in the past. He's a lawyer. One name on that leadership organizing committee that certainly caught my attention was Sharon White, who is the longtime president of the BC Liberals and who is
Mm.
a good friend of mine, frankly. And she's awesome. And for them to recruit Sharon onto that committee, I think was a really smart move. She knows party processes inside and out, and has a fantastic network. So they do have some good people on there. Claire Rattay, I believe, is on there representing caucus, party president, HSD. So Bruce Halser is uh, the aforementioned Bruce Halser from previous episodes. He's on there as well. He was the one who was taking affidavits from MLAs who decided that maybe John Rostad should take a vacation. So, um, anyways, they're growing up as a party. They're getting good people to do these processes. Now, there's a lot of questions about what are the rules going to be? When is it going to be? What's the spending limit going to be? What is the
Hmm.
deposit the candidates have to put down to get in the race? When's the membership cutoff going to be? How are they going to vote? Are they going to vote electronically? Are they going to vote on paper? Is it going to be mail out? On and on and on and on. Probably in-person voting is probably not logistically possible, I would imagine. Um, so I'm very interested to see how those rules come out.
Well, and I think you mentioned a couple of people, but I didn't know about Sharon White, but that's a really good point. Claire Rattay, though, is continuing to emerge as one of the front bench forces for the Conservatives, in my opinion. Her career started in Terrace. She was, I think, owns a tattoo business there,
Yeah.
but she's articulate. She's been writing her own blog on decriminalization and so on. She's a new voice on that front. She has some experience in her own life with addictions and treatment. I think that Leah Warbus is another person in that group. So the argument that was made in the run-up to the election that the Conservatives were kind of a chaotic clown car or circus, I think was one of the terms thrown about by Kevin Falcon at one point, doesn't cut it anymore. Clearly, with this new leadership process and some of the new people coming in, plus the demonstrated talent of some of the current people, there's a much more viable alternative in front of
Yeah.
the voters than was there even 3 months ago, which is a
Well,
problem for the NDP.
and they do have that. The party does have a very different character than the BC Liberals, and that's, neither
That's
here
how
nor
life
there, I
goes.
suppose.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've noticed is that, like, for instance, you mentioned Gavin Dew wrote an op-ed about some key considerations for the leadership contest, but that was published in the Western Standard. And for
Yeah.
those who aren't aware of the Western Standard, I believe it basically will be the newspaper of record or online publication of record for this BC Conservative leadership race.
Hmm.
This is where conservatives go to get information on politics, among other sources. But
Right.
if you want to, they're probably going to get a lot of stuff leaked to them. They're probably going to get a lot of stuff, a lot of the inside baseball in the conservative race will be in the Western Standard. So that's a publication to watch. They have a reporter who covers the legislature as well. So expect to hear a lot from him.
But along that
Uh,
vein, just one more name that's not in the race is Aaron Gunn, which is kind of
yeah.
interesting to me because he's obviously a forceful person. We've had him on, he's very articulate. But he ran a social media campaign saying, "Hey, everybody out there, should I run?" And then he did another one saying, "If you thought I should run, would you join the Conservative Party to support me?" And it was like a series of selfies that ended with a YouTube address or a social media address saying, "I've decided not to run." I think that he's obviously still at the beginning of his career, and who knows how things will turn out for him. But the idea that he would be a major player in provincial politics, which he's been flirting with or hoping for quite some time, is clearly not going to be the case. And I think that was another sign that this party and this movement are moving in a different direction than he
Well,
started with.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that the circumstances worked out for Aaron in this particular case because of the tenuous minority that the federal government has. And
Well, he
to
had
give
good
up,
reasons for not running. I'm just
yeah,
saying that his presence there would have been a very, very strong voice from what now is already looking like the
yeah.
past of the BC Conservative Party
I
after
would, yeah,
9 months.
I think his endorsement may have some impact in the race.
Yeah.
I don't think
Well, we
it's
see Herman. I think
necessarily.
you're going to get to Herman Bangu in a minute here, right? Who
Yeah.
have you got? Who have you got?
Okay, well, here's what all the cool kids are talking about. First of all, I should announce the ones that actually say they're going to run for sure. So you got Yuri Fulmer, who's a business person and slash philanthropist and chancellor of Capilano University, who is in. He's got a slick video that he's released. He's doing events. He's been in Cranbrook. He's going to the island. Um, owns a ton of A&W franchises.
Hmm.
Already, people are attacking him for temporary foreign workers that he allegedly has used at A&Ws, which is not uncommon. Tim Hortons,
Be
people do it.
shocking if he hadn't actually. I mean,
So that's the type of welcome to politics, Yuri. You're going to get a lot of that. I'm sure he probably recognizes that. But the video that he released, it's certainly of a professional quality that one would expect from a serious leadership candidate. people are tearing it apart and, you know, and will make comments about it and what kind of car he drives and that kind of stuff. But um, he, I think he's got first mover advantage. Like he's the first out there with a message. Now others will catch up to him, but good for Yuri to just say, "Why wait? Nobody knows who I am. I better get my name out there." And while people are waiting for other candidates to declare, here's a candidate who says, "I'm in." So um, he's in. MLA Sheldon Clare from Caribou Prince George, I believe it's called. I might get the name of the riding wrong. It's Quesnel Prince George. He's in. I believe he's been the caucus whip, or he's had some position in caucus.
No, no.
He's a first term guy. Pretty, I believe he's on the conservative right side of the party. He had run as an independent in a federal campaign in the past, and he's a kind of a gun rights guy. So we'll see what he has to say. Um, and then there's a fellow, I can't remember his name, guy out of Rosslyn who wants to run, that business guy. But the ones people are waiting for are Caroline Elliott,
Right.
who we've had in the show before.
She's
The
done
camp
some social media posts that seem adjacent to the declaration she's running.
Well, the campaign plane is on the tarmac. The engines are revving. I think her supporters are probably wondering when the pilot's going to show up. Um, we'll see if the pilot gets out of the lounge or not. Chris Gardner, another one that a lot of people are talking about. Again, I'm hearing he is going to run, but nobody knows for sure. I would expect his colleague Jordan Bateman to be very involved in that campaign.
Well, Jordan had some
Um,
social media posts that suggested he was chilling champagne or whatever his beverage of celebration is.
okay.
Big news
Uh,
coming. Hooray. Wait
it,
for it, sort of thing.
maybe it has something to do with the Green Bay Packers. I don't know. Um, the Peter Millibar, people are expecting will run, the finance critic for in the caucus. He has the advantage of being a senior MLA, whereas Gardner and Elliott are outside the legislature. And I'm told that there's, a significant number of MLAs that may endorse Millibar. Now, MLAs does not equal party members. It can help, but it's not decisive in terms of membership sales. So great to have caucus endorsements, but not the be all end all. Christie, when she won the leadership in 2011, had one endorsement, and Abbott and Falcon had about 20 each. And so there you go, right? So nice to have. Sometimes it slows you down a little too if you got to consult with them all day long. Ian Black, former MLA, uh, and former head of the Board of Trade.
Yeah,
He
Board of
has,
Trade.
I expect he will run. Dimitri Panagopoulos has publicly said he's going to be helping Ian Black, and Dimitri has run a lot of winning campaigns. He ran helped run Andrew Wilkinson's leadership campaign. He's been involved with all sorts of other contenders. So, so I mean, that's a pretty big lineup already. Harman Bangu, you mentioned, says he'll run if he likes the rules. He's the MLA for Langley Abbotsford. Then we got Save On Guy, Daryl Jones, who
Yeah.
kind of wandered into the leadership race surprisingly in December, and we haven't heard from him since. Busy
Don't think,
raising Save
don't
On more
think,
points.
yeah. I, interesting guy. I don't think he'll be there at the end, but we'll see.
He's yeah, and maybe the political family isn't as comfortable as Western family for him. And then that's a little joke there, folks. Um, and the other name mentioned was Carrie Lynn Finley, who's the former MP from South Surrey. Her husband is in caucus, Brent Chapman. Um, I'll be surprised if she gets in, but her name is touted. So I don't know. Did I miss any on your list, Jeff? That's a lot.
No, but I'm interested in the breakdown here between we hear a lot of debate about populism these days. Frankly, I like populism, both of all types. I don't think it's an illness as some suggest,
Very,
but
Very Glenn Clark of you.
well, John Horgan of me too, maybe. But
Yes,
I
that's
look at
true.
this group and I go, okay, on the conservative side, populism has been important. It's a very, very important thing right now on the conservative side of the movement. Who of those folks can kind of do it organically It's an issue, to be honest, that David Eby struggles with sometimes too. But can you demonstrate that you understand how regular people are living and experiencing things? And that's going to be a question for
Well,
some
it's
of these.
different brands. I mean, you've got Caroline Elliott, who's got a kind of a populist issue on the First Nations issue that she's been very
Right.
outspoken about. She's herself is a PhD intellectual,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so that's an interesting combination. You got Chris Gardner, who I would call him a business populist, leading the ICBA, and they have strong messaging coming out of that organization. Chris has been involved in politics a long time and really understands the suburbs. You've got Peter Millibar, who's would be the foremost candidate from the interior where populism reigns. So I
Well,
don't
the
know.
others have been around politics, but Ian Black and Peter Millibar have the experience in politics, and that's going to be, I
Yeah.
think, helpful to them.
Well, I will say for Gardner and Elliott, they've both done political staff work
Yeah.
and have been around politics for a long time at a high level. It's not the same, but it's something. Um, so, the members will have to kick the tires on it. Fulmer has run for office and had considered running for office previously as well with the BC Liberals, but he he's obviously going to sell his business chops. And some people will say, well, this guy's not a populist or this guy, is a bit slick. But, there's probably room in the race for a guy like him to just lean into that and say, I'm a successful guy, deal with it.
Hmm.
So, I think we're potentially looking at a race where on that first ballot, maybe no one's over 20, 22%, and it's really about where your second and third and fourth choices come from, assuming it's some kind of alternate voting system. So,
Well, and I think Surrey is going to be a big part of this race, one way or the other, in terms of the issues, but also people who participate in the contest. And
yeah.
some of those candidates are probably very familiar with the Surrey political terrain, and others less so. So I think that's going to be a
Well, I
factor in
would
how it turns
expect
out.
though that this will be a weighted vote though. Like every riding will probably be treated equally, unlike some other like the federal NDP. It's a
Right.
big one big bucket of votes.
Yeah.
But Surrey will be important because they've got eight or nine ridings, but also Surrey, the networks from Surrey, especially in the South Asian community, have tentacles all across the province, and that's
Hmm.
really where it gets really important. Um, so let's finish on just the Greens and the one party. So the Greens have a new leader. She's been out hustling around the province. You got the two guys in the legislature. I mean, they seem that they're going to hit some kind of reckoning this year in terms of the leader's direction and how the MLAs fit into that, especially as we head to DRIPA legislation.
Yeah. Well, I think there's no way the Greens support changes for DRIPA because they've always had success in Cowichan, and Cowichan First Nation is party to one of the key cases.
Yeah.
And so the South Island vote is so crucial to them, and they have had a history of doing well in Indigenous communities with Adam Olson as an MLA and Sonia Furstenau successful in Cowichan. But that's where they've been all along. They were there in the minority government, pushing along with the NDP for embracing UNDRIP and all that kind of stuff. So I don't think that there's any possibility. And also, Rob Botterill, one of the two MLAs, is an Indigenous rights lawyer. I see zero possibility personally that the Greens would um, allow DRIPA to go down if they could stop it. But they're not. They only have the two votes.
Yeah.
What I think is going to be interesting is to see whether the two MLAs in the House, who are not kind of the types who would pound the table about oligarchs, start to move more in that direction, and how Emily Lowen as leader starts to try to shape their response to the budget. Because there will be a lot of stakeholder groups out there who will be furious about the budget because they're not getting protected in the way they had hoped. There's just, I
Well,
think you mentioned it earlier. I think one of the big issues management challenges for the NDP in this session is people who will be shocked to discover that even in flat funding, 3 years in a row that's the same, you're not able to continue with the same level of services. You're going to see a reduction.
well, I wonder whether someone in the NDP strategy room is thinking with Emily Loan as the Green leader, if there's a perceived misalignment between her and the MLAs, whether one or both of those MLAs end up as NDP MLAs.
That could be. I have no idea.
And the prospect of a cabinet post um, could be enticing and secure the NDP's majority. So, anyways, that's not a prediction, folks. That's just
No. Well,
amusing.
if people were that ambitious politically, they would not run for the Greens. And I don't say that to be just a smart ass.
Yeah, but
although
if you're
probably sounds
unhappy,
smart ass.
with the direction your party's in, and you have an alternative, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It happens. The one party kind of blew up in December. That's one I could have
One BC
predicted.
became two BC. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I could have predicted. Just all sorts of just chaos. They're going to lose their official party status, and I don't underestimate the impact that Dallas Brody can have in advancing issues to an audience on the Indigenous issues that is craving that type of messaging, and it has a ceiling. It's a pretty low ceiling, but it's there. It's say under 10% of the vote. So I think she could still be a thorn in the side of the BC Conservatives, and I don't think the BC Conservatives can take her back either.
No.
Like I think it'd be a really
But I
bad
don't see her
message.
getting reelected. I don't think that electorate in,
No, I
Coachina will
don't see it
support her
either.
again.
I don't see it either. But in the meantime, she's got a microphone.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll see. We'll see.
Well,
Well,
Trevor Halford's comments about Eleanor Sturko were, I thought, instructive. I assumed he was speaking about her. She was thrown out of the caucus. So
yeah,
for her to resume, to rejoin the Conservative ranks will be not obvious. It'll probably take a new leader and a discussion with
yeah.
her to decide that.
It'll be a
If she
journey.
wants to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Jeff, let's have our first mini bar of the year.
I'm going to take a shot at the Premier about decriminalization.
Okay.
When the decision was made to reverse the decriminalization program, which I thought was necessary and I supported at the time personally, even though I was deeply involved in getting it started, it was clear there was no public support left. It had been determined by the public that this was a reason why we saw so much street disorder. I thought the Premier was right to make that move, but what he didn't do was just cancel the thing completely. It was being run under a federal exemption. And I thought he could have simply called Ottawa and said, we started this program. We needed the exemption for it. The program's a failure. I'm going to stop it. Take your exemption back. But part of it was retained for reasons that are obscure to me. I can't even tell what the exemption is covering anymore. And now we're having another discussion about the final expiry of the exemption, I think on January the 31st or something. So I think that should have just been cleaned up right off the bat, just cancel the entire thing. Then you could say to the public, look, we don't have decriminalization anymore. It's exactly the way it was when we got here. Let's now see why it is we have all this street disorder, because it won't be because of our decriminalization pilot. So I think it's a second discussion that was unnecessary, and I wish that they'd simply given up the exemption when they made the major decision, because the public thought that decriminalization was ending. Now we're hearing that actually there's still one more discussion. It sounds like it will now end, but I thought that happened before, and I just think it should have been tidied up then. The question now is, well, what about street disorder, which is a problem in many cities in Canada where decriminalization never occurred, and so what should be done about that? More broadly speaking, is a question that then we can bear down on. But we still have this decriminalization straw man to knock down here. Finally, we'll knock it down. But I wish we'd done that in the first place.
My public service message to Premier Eby and his people is that objects in the rearview mirror are closer than they appear.
Yeah.
And I think heading into this year, I feel like there's a real potential for a malaise on the NDP with a bunch of issues. This London drugs one that we talked about earlier has kind of caught my attention because I think it's symbolic.
Yeah.
And then you've got all these other things, and things are chipping away, and playtime is over. Rustad's gone. Conservatives are going to grow up in a hurry, and over the next few months, whenever this leadership wraps up, say April or whatever it is, there's going to be probably millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars anyway spent on advertising, promoting the Conservative candidates, and attacking the NDP.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to have an impact. May not be massive, but it'll be enough to maybe put the NDP behind in the polls. And the psychological impact that could happen, that if things just maybe are drifting away a bit, and if we see some leadership approval numbers that are just start slipping a bit, I don't know. So it happens in politics. Things are never, they're either going one way or the other, you know. But that wasn't my mini bar spot. My mini bar spot is I'm going to take a shot too. I'm going to take a shot at the federal Liberal MPs in British Columbia. You've been pretty quiet. I haven't heard much from you since April. There's very little cabinet profile. There's very little MP profile. We have a massive issue, the Canada-Alberta MOU. I have no idea where the Federal Liberal Caucus really stands on it. You know, it seems to me, I assume they're following behind the Prime Minister, but they're not exactly at the front of the parade of it either. So I hear more from MP like Corey Hogan from Alberta talking about these types of issues than I hear from British Columbia. So I'm just getting a little wakey call. Maybe it's a little taking a shot of espresso. Wakey. This is politics. These are issues you should be heard from. And your Prime Minister is way out in front. And I think a lot of British Columbians are appreciating Carney's leadership, but I don't see the follow-on of the team. So we'll see. We'll see how things proceed in 2026. Well, thank you to Trevor Halford, interim leader of the BC Conservative Party, for visiting Hotel Pacifico this week. Thanks to our sponsors for allowing us to bring this episode to you for free. We'll see you next week. BC, you can never leave.